The desert was waking in slow fire when they caught the Apache boy. The dawn light bled along the horizon, painting the rocks in colors of rust and bone. His bare feet slipped through dust and thorn, but he did not cry out. The sound of hooves came behind him, men shouting, rifles cracking the silence apart. When they took him down, the air smelled of gunpowder and fear. They bound his wrists with coarse rope and dragged him back toward the town, a scatter of wooden shacks, a church without a bell, and one long shadow stretching from the gallows tree on the hill. The boy said nothing. His skin was scratched raw, eyes dark and still, reflecting nothing but the sky. The men who surrounded him were loud in their triumph, their anger a living thing that kicked up dust at their boots. "Found him near Miller's Creek," one of them said. "Still had blood on his hands. No one asked whose blood." No one wanted to know. The sheriff watched from the edge of the crowd, a man shaped by duty and regret. He was older than he looked, the desert sun having taken its toll. His voice carried a weariness that no badge could defend. "You sure this is the one?" "Don't need to be sure," another man spat. "Miller's dead. Someone's gotta pay." The widow sat on her porch at the far end of the street, wrapped in black, a silhouette against the pale boards of her house. She didn't look up when they passed, though her fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. The wind tugged at the loose ends of her veil. She had not wept since the morning her husband was brought home with a bullet in his chest, and the townsfolk mistook her silence for strength. The boy stumbled once, and one of the ranchers shoved him forward. The rope bit deeper into his wrists. Still, he did not make a sound. That quiet unnerved them more than curses would have. When they reached the cottonwood tree, someone tossed the noose over the high branch. It swung lazily in the wind, whispering of a dozen forgotten hangings. The sheriff stood beneath it, his hand trembling just slightly as he reached for the rope. The crowd pressed closer. A mutter rose, anger, grief, and the heat of vengeance melting into one indistinct sound. Then the widow rose. Her steps were slow, deliberate, as she crossed the dust between her porch and the tree. The men parted before her without knowing why. She stopped beside the boy, the hem of her dress brushing his ankles. Her eyes, gray and unreadable, moved from the sheriff to the noose and back again. "You'll not hang him," she said, her voice low but sharp enough to cut the air. The sheriff froze. The widow reached out, her hand steady on the boy's shoulder. "He's my son now." The desert went still. Even the wind forgot to breathe. The cabin creaked in the wind that night, its boards sighing like tired bones. The widow set a bowl of soup on the table and slid it toward the boy. He sat across from her, hands still bound, eyes fixed on the steam rising from the tin. The lamplight flickered, carving shadows that moved like ghosts between them. She spoke softly, though he could not understand the words. "Eat. You'll need your strength." He hesitated, then lifted the spoon with trembling fingers. Outside, the town murmured like a restless animal. Men argued by lamplight, voices sharp with disbelief. The widow's act had broken something sacred, something unspoken, the border between who was worth saving and who was not. The sheriff had spent the afternoon trying to calm them, his patience worn to the thread. He'd seen the look in the widow's eyes before, a kind of grief that refused to die quietly. By morning, he rode out to her house. The wind carried dust over the porch as he dismounted, hat in hand. She met him at the door, unflinching. "You can't keep him," he said. His tone was measured, almost gentle, as though speaking to a child standing too close to a cliff. "The town won't allow it." Her gaze held his. "The town didn't lose what I lost." He looked past her, saw the boy stacking firewood in the yard. "He's Apache," the sheriff said quietly. "That's all they'll see." Her lips thinned. "Then they're blind." He wanted to argue, but the words faltered. There was something in the air between them, an invisible weight pressing on both their chests. He left without another word. The boy worked in silence through the day, moving like someone who had learned to be invisible. He mended a fence, fetched water, carried wood. When she tried to thank him, he only nodded. Yet she noticed how he watched everything, the horses, the windmill, even her hands as she sewed by the window. His eyes, though young, carried the knowledge of someone who had seen too much. That evening, she found him standing by her husband's grave behind the cabin. He held a small feather between his fingers, turning it in the dying light. She joined him without speaking. The silence between them was heavy but not cruel. She felt something stir inside her, something long dormant. Later, as she doused the lamp, she caught him looking at her, not with fear, but with an expression she could not name. Trust, perhaps, or a fragile curiosity about this strange, sorrowful woman who had claimed him as her own. When the night settled deep and cold, whispers moved through the town again. Men gathered outside the saloon, their anger brewing like a storm. "She's gone soft," one said. "He'll slit her throat before winter." Another spat into the dust. Then we ended ourselves. By dawn they would come for the boy. But for now the desert slept in uneasy peace. The storm came crawling over the desert before midnight, black clouds stitched with lightning. The widow woke to the sound of the shutters banging and the absence of breathing beside the hearth. The boy's blanket was empty. Her heart lurched into her throat. She lit the lantern with shaking hands and stepped out into the wind. The rain began in thin, hard needles, pricking her face as she followed the faint trail of footprints leading away from the cabin. The footprints wound through sagebrush and rock, up toward the ridge that overlooked the town. Each step filled with water as the storm thickened. She called his name, though she had never known what it truly was. Her voice vanished in the roar of thunder. When she reached the crest, she found him standing alone, arms outstretched to the sky. The lightning painted his silhouette in white fire. He turned toward her. Calm, his hair plastered to his forehead. "They're coming," he said. His English was halting but clear, the first words he had ever spoken to her. She stepped closer, breath caught between pride and fear. "Then we'll go, now, before they reach the ridge." He shook his head. "No, run." He placed his hand against his chest, then against hers. No fear. Down below, the glow of torches flickered through the rain. The men from town were coming, angry, soaked, driven by something darker than justice. The sheriff rode ahead, his jaw clenched, his voice lost in the wind as he tried to keep them back. The widow could see it in his eyes even from the distance, the weight of a choice no man should have to make. When the mob reached the ridge, the boy did not move. The widow stepped in front of him, her body blocking the path. "You'll not touch him," she said, voice low but steady. "Step aside," one of the ranchers shouted. "He's a killer!" "He's a child," she answered. "And I'll stand with him." The sheriff dismounted, rain running down his hat brim. "You know what they'll do, ma'am. They'll kill you, too." "Then let them." A hush rippled through the crowd, the storm itself seeming to hold its breath. Lightning split the sky again, throwing the world into flashes of silver and shadow. The widow's dress clung to her frame. Her face looked carved from the same stone that littered the hills. The boy behind her did not flinch. One man's nerve broke first. He fired a shot into the air, shouting something no one heard over the thunder. The horses reared, torches hissed in the rain, and chaos swallowed the ridge. The widow felt the world explode around her, voices, gunfire, the taste of iron and smoke. When the thunder rolled back into silence, one body lay still in the mud. The sheriff knelt beside it, eyes wide with horror. Rain washed the blood away, but not the sin. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the boy was gone. The dawn came quietly, pale and hollow, the desert washed clean of its fury. Smoke curled from the ridge like a ghost too tired to rise. The sheriff rode alone, hat low against the morning glare, his coat heavy with rain and blood. The town behind him still slept, but soon there would be questions about the gunfire, about who lived and who did not. He had no answers fit for daylight. The trail wound through mud and stone until it reached the cottonwood tree at the edge of town. The noose still swung there, soaked and limp. Beneath it, the sheriff dismounted and knelt beside a fresh mound of earth. The grave was shallow, hastily carved, but marked with care. A simple wooden cross leaned against the roots. Her name was burned into it with the tip of a knife. He had dug it himself before dawn, his hands blistered and raw. The storm had scattered the mob. Some fled, some wept. None spoke of what they'd done. The man who fired the first shot lay nearby, covered with a saddle blanket. The widow had fallen before anyone could stop it, stepping into the bullet meant for the boy. The sheriff remembered the look on her face as the light left her eyes. Not fear, not surprise, only a kind of peace that broke him more than her dying did. He stayed there until the sun burned through the clouds, watching its slow light spill across the grave. "You were braver than all of us," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. He placed her locket at the base of the cross. Inside it was a single feather, the boy's gift, and a strand of her dark hair. The boy was gone before dawn, vanished into the desert as if the earth had swallowed him. The sheriff had tried to follow but found only faint tracks leading east, where the land rose into red hills and silence. He let him go. The desert, he thought, would take better care of him than any man here. Weeks passed. The town buried its shame beneath work and whiskey. The gallows tree stood untouched, but no one spoke of hanging again. The widow's house remained just as she'd left it, windows shuttered, rocking chair still creaking when the wind came through. The sheriff visited often, sometimes leaving food on the porch, sometimes only standing there until dusk. One evening, years later, a traveler rode into the valley. He found the sheriff older, slower, sitting outside the same saloon. "You're far from home," the stranger said, his voice calm, his eyes dark as storm clouds. The sheriff studied him a long moment. The years had changed him, taller now, stronger. But those eyes, those silent embers, were the same. "You found your way back," the sheriff murmured. The man nodded once. Behind him, the cottonwood swayed in the wind. Carved into its trunk were 3 simple words: "She saved me." The sheriff smiled faintly, then looked toward the endless horizon where the desert met the sky. The wind carried the rest of the story away.